Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever we find you today. I'm Shannon Flanagan. I am the founder of Retail Women in Tech, as well as the founder of Retail Connected. We are so pleased to continue our partnership with Retail AI Council. This is our third webinar I'm doing together and our first of 2025. So today we're hosting a discussion that, in my humble opinion, is not getting the attention it deserves. There are countless webinars on marketing and in-store use cases. Even supply chain gets a lot of nods, but what's not is how AI is transforming the way products are made, planned, and managed through end of life. So in today's webinar, we're sitting down with the fabulous Lisa, who's a dear friend of mine as well, one of my retail BFFs. And we're going to talk about finding the right balance between AI and human insights, building AI proficiency across teams, empowering teams through AI-driven tools, and talking about the role that women and allies are playing in the world of tech. But before we get to the juicy part of this discussion, I want to start with why we are doing these webinars. Reality is only 30% of the AI workforce are women, and that can be anywhere from 22% to 30%, to be honest. And this was something I found out that is shocking to me and very, very scary. But the whole reason that I called up Doug, the CEO of Retail AI Council, last summer and said, we've got to do something, is that nearly 45% of AI systems analyzed by UC Berkeley exhibit gender bias. A woman by the name of Sola Mahfouz, a quantum computer research at Tufts University, stated, the unique lived experiences of women can profoundly shape the theoretical foundations of technology. It can also open new applications of the technology. When technology is developed with just one perspective, it's like looking at the world half blind. Despite us women being directly or indirectly responsible for up to $16 trillion, or 85% of consumer spending, our impact on AI and industry remains very limited. The lack of representation doesn't make business sense, not to mention its implications for society. So why are we doing this? We want to encourage, enable, and elevate women in our industry to create the impact we know we can make, and frankly, that society needs. There are already too few women in retail tech, let alone in AI roles, or even as just as important, in my opinion, actively pursuing opportunities to advocate for and lead in AI within the organizations. The data is unanimous. Diverse teams not only create better products, but in the world of AI, they'll also ensure human-centered approaches that reflect the makeup of our society. Supporting women in AI just isn't about inclusion. It's about leveraging incredible talent to fuel the innovation, address the bias, and deliver the impact. And you're going to keep hearing that word because that's how important AI is. In functions that are responsible for product to market, there is actually a more favorable percentage of women, putting us in a position to have a tremendous impact. I'd probably be $1 million if I got a penny for how many times we're going to today, Lisa, on how AI is used to create not only better customer experiences, but also the employee experience. So with no further ado, it's time for Lisa to tell us about who she is.
Well, Shannon, how do I follow that? My name is Lisa Amlani, and I am the principal and co-founder of Retail Strategy Group, the Merchant Life newsletter, and of course, more recently, we just wrote a book called The Whole Sale. Yes, super excited. So my background is really merchandising and product development. I spent over 20 years in apparel, accessories, not only creating product and private label, but also working for brands across the globe. I worked with Ralph Lauren a lot. My last industry role was based in London. I'm British Canadian and I'm everywhere. But my last role was based in London in my hometown. And I was the head of buying for the Lauren brand for Northern Europe. And then fast forward 2018, I worked with Accenture. And so did you, Shannon, right?
You sure
Yes.
did, yeah.
Okay. And I was hired as a merchandising SME, as an experienced hire for Accenture. And I spent most of that time working with this tiny brand out of Beaverton. I'm sure we can guess who that is. And this is where I really saw this huge opportunity, not only for being a consultant in the space that comes with tremendous amount of industry experience, But I really saw the opportunity of innovating how we create product, how we go to market, and how we can reduce things like overdevelopment and increase speed. So that's really when Retail Strategy Group was born in November 2020, height of the pandemic. That's when you should always start a business. And, we really found I would say, a lot of opportunity to talk about product development practices in this space, which I'm so happy to be talking about today.
Well, before we get started, I was going to share one of the reasons why we were love at first sight is our experience with product to market operations. I've been in retail since I was 18, but the bulk of my experience has been working with specialty apparel companies like Land's End and Gap Inc., two tours of duty. And I have done a ton of work on what has been affectionately called, in a lot of places, thanks to Gap, the pipeline calendar, and
Mhm.
looking to figure out how do we squeeze a day here or there. I might have said when I first met you, Lisa, that I was like, if I never have to deal with Chinese New Year again and poor merchandise planning having to work over Christmas, it would be too soon. And when I was at Gap Inc. back in 2015, I mean, this was top of mind is how do you find the reductions? What is most exciting to me is how AI can finally accelerate the value of what you'll share a little bit about that 52-week timeline that
Yeah.
so many other brands have not have so many brands have not cracked, but so many brands have. So for those in the audience who don't know what product to market means, give them a quick 101 because that'll be the foundation by which we have the rest of our conversations.
Sure. So the concept to market calendar, product creation calendar, or pipeline calendar, what that really means is when you're conceptualizing a product from the start of a season all the way to market. And market can mean a few different things. Market can mean the date you get your final samples in order to sell to wholesale. It could also mean your NDC date, but it is that timeline from going from a concept all the way to creating that product. And when we think about the cross functions that are involved, we have sourcing, costing, raw material planning, merchandising, design, development, um, salespeople, marketing, right? It's like every cross function actually does touch that concept to market calendar. Just to give you an example, you mentioned 52 weeks. That's pretty normal. A year or longer to go from concept to market to develop one season of product. Um, on the flip side, you have ultra fast fashion players like Zara and Shein, and it takes them less than 30 days. So we know that we may not agree with those practices of ultra fast fashion, but there's a lot we can learn. And technology plays a big part in that.
Well, and one of the things people might not know is that the long toll in the tent, so to speak,
Mm,
is the sample development timeline. Right? It's still a 6 to 8 week process that happens at least once, if not two, sometimes three times in that product to market calendar. And when we think about the ways that with technology that's already out there that can change the game and shorten that, it's pretty key. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. So when did you start hearing about AI in this space? Because as we kicked off, I said we're not talking about a lot of this, and you're like, you know what? I'm not going to focus on marketing and sales
yeah,
because we talk about that so
exactly.
much, and we want these webinars to actually bring content that is not getting the airtime it deserves. Um, so we'll talk about when I first started hearing about it. I think we're about the same age, but I'll take you back. Some of those that you and the audience might remember back at the turn of the century. The first idea around demand forecasting was introduced into the assortment planning process, the merchandise planning, allocation, et cetera. And for years, there was a ton of distrust in the results that were being made. It was a real heavy lift for organizations because they had to have statisticians on board. People didn't understand. It felt like a black box. And accuracy rates around 70 to 80% were unacceptable. Now, I always thought, is that how accurate are the people who are actually doing the work? But that aside, but back in the day too, like you could only do a 13-week SKU DC forecast because that's how big the actual box was.
Yeah.
Certainly cloud computing changed that, and the idea of machine learning started to emerge, and it started to get a little bit of traction. But frankly, 2020 happened, and all bets were off. Machine learning was so heavily dependent on historical information, as was any of the, typical demand forecasting algorithms. So I think we saw a real departure from the opportunity that could happen there. Now, that's no longer the case. Excuse me. We're starting to see it be more widely adopted. But that's my little experience with AI in this space, outside of my passion around 3D fit technology, but that's a whole nother discussion. So now it's your turn. When did you start seeing it?
So I think, similar to you, we heard a lot about machine learning. Um, I never heard it called AI. Like I heard machine
Oh.
learning and forecasting and planning. And when I was at Ralph Lauren all those years and Clamonaco and all these department stores, I will tell you that merch planning did not trust the technology. So, there wasn't a lot of machine learning actually being used, even though it might have been, in the program or in the tech stack that we were using. So when I started going to these shows, NRF, Shop Talk, even PI Apparel, and the lead, of course, and we love the lead, that's when I really started to think about, okay, how are we talking about AI in the product creation process? Now, one of the things that I think that we focus on is really process innovation. When we go into a retailer and we talk to these cross-functional teams, they're so used to doing things the same way. And they have been for so long, right? And I think what's fascinating is number one, you brought up COVID. COVID really changed the way we worked. We didn't have a choice because we couldn't go into the office to see physical samples and try on garments and work with a fit model. Those things did not exist. So what I was hearing brands doing is that, and this was happening at Nike as well when I was there with Accenture, they were literally mailing swatches to get approval. Now, what I find super fascinating is that some brands have gone back to those old ways of working, but a lot of the new brands, which we're going to go through some examples, they actually adopted things like digital material design and development, reducing physical sampling, innovating that product creation calendar, what we spoke about earlier, on how they can create product differently. And these are some of the things, really concepts that we sort of, I would say, developed further, like a materials first strategy, like flexible product creation. We did a talk at at PI Apparel in our early days of retail strategy group, and we said, you know what, AI is actually not artificial intelligence; it's acceptable inequality. Like that's what it should be, where not all products are equal, so they shouldn't be created in the same way. So a lot of these concepts, I think, have started to come into fruition, I would say the last couple of years.
I love that. I have not heard you say
Yeah,
that. You'll have to copyright it or
I
trademark
will. I will.
it. Fantastic. I love it. So because there are so many functions involved in product to market, I mean, you listed a few, and there are got more than probably two hands that we can
Yeah.
count. And because it does impact so many, let's talk about them more specifically. Now, something you and I are incredibly passionate about is an unlock that has been sitting there since it feels like the beginning of time.
Yep.
That as as we went from merchants kind of owning everything way back in the day to really driving more functional expertise, we did have an explosion of functions, and that didn't though follow with the kind of collaboration that needed to happen, as well as the lack of integration from systems. So you'd have one system get built, all that data would go to a data warehouse, replicate that across all these different functions. Next thing you know, people have heard me, if they've heard me speak, this is something I say almost every time, that when I was at one of the largest specialty brands that I've already named, there were 6 different versions of receipts, which is, one in the top 3 of the most important metrics you need to have to manage your business. So we know that one, there's process changes, but the technology can unlock value, not just for the functional team, but
Yeah.
also as the cross-functional team. So let's dive in a little deeper to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the most interesting part of the conversation, and we could probably talk about this part for hours. So I'm going to try and, keep it tight. I think that there's this balance that needs to be made across these functions, from thinking about tradition, like the way that we've always done things, and then innovation and using AI as a partner. So assisting, augmenting, all the things that we hear for other parts of the organization, we
Yes.
need to actually think about those impacts of AI across how we're going to market today, how we're doing our work. So I can go into, let's say, innovation and technology. So the current processes that are used today to create product, there isn't that true balance of tech and touch. So we don't know when to use the technology, when to go hands-on into a product. But I think that, as you mentioned earlier with the tech stack, a lot of the tech stack doesn't talk to each other. So in order to get things like insights, we've talked about this before around insights being held hostage. And they almost are, right? When design, development, merchandising, all of these functions can actually leverage insights. So we're not using those unlocks just yet. The POS doesn't inform the merch team. The merch team doesn't, what they're gaining in terms of insights doesn't actually talk to the PLM or the POS. So I think that's where we're going to start to see more seamlessness and integration across the product creation functions. Um, Starting with supply chain, sourcing, costing, vendor management. Today, AI can really help to simplify the sourcing strategy. And I think this is something we need to do almost immediately with the upcoming policy changes and how that's going to impact, cost of product because of tariffs. So we're all nervous about this, but I think we should be looking at our simplifying our supply chain and sourcing strategies. We should have been doing this ages ago. So now I think it's just going to, let's say, fuel more strategies around simplifying and using AI to determine what vendor strategy, what mill matrix is best, and how to organize our product creation process based on the type of product we're creating. Did you have any questions about that? Because I know that that is a lot.
It
Sourcing is a
is.
huge
It is.
function, right?
Yeah, so you've talked a little bit about the design and production, but let's go in a little deeper to some of the things that you're seeing there. So we talk. I certainly from a vendor management, mill management
Yeah.
perspective, no brainer. And we know that poor sourcing and
Oh,
team costing teams today, and mills, they have countless spreadsheets, right? And a lot of those teams to date had not really had tools, right? It was not
no.
until those strategies have been identified and then they got imported into, and that's being generous. The sourcing strategies, the mill strategies were tied to a placeholder SKU or maybe a SKU by the time they got into a PLM.
Yeah.
You did, let's go a little deeper on like capacity planning, et
Oh,
cetera,
yeah.
and grading, pattern making.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many tools out there today, and we could definitely reference a few that are actually in New York, which I've worked with that are awesome. But I think what's interesting here is the way that, again, we've always done the work, cutting patterns. Designing and developing those patterns and grading, a lot of that actually can be done by machine now. What is fascinating to me is how we talk about functions like materials and sourcing and how they're not really partners and collaborating with design and merch. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that as we think about innovating the process. So when we talk about grading and pattern making and tech design and how AI, especially AI and machine learning, can influence how we grade that product, how we resource plan at factory, how we could work better with our factory partners and actually have them do some of that work, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more things like speed to market, which is very important for brands today, is because they want to get closer to market and closer to the customer, especially when they're thinking about what product to create. Now, I think what's fascinating is if you're in apparel, from a textile perspective, AI can detect errors in fabric. What happens today is that a whole assembly line stops if there's an error in the fabric or an error in the print. Right now, we have capabilities across solutions in AI, and there's a lot of actually think the textile school out of North Carolina State is working on a lot of these use cases with brands, which is amazing in itself, to help brands detect those quality concerns early so that it doesn't impact that production line, which of course impacts things like manual intervention when we're creating that product. I think there's a huge unlock and a time savings, as well as capacity planning, when you're working with the right factory partners who onboard this type of technology. So I think that the opportunity is huge.
Well, and I remember the what really moment that testing of the product doesn't happen until after everything's been placed, orders are happening, and you might find out a product that you thought was going to be like a, a great, maybe basic or something
Yeah.
that, people would, easily fall in love with and be able to use over and over again now needs dry cleaning. And suddenly
Oh,
the
yeah.
value prop of that product goes out I mean, personally, I don't dry clean anything. If it can't go in the washer, done deal. And that demonstrates that. Wait, let's talk a little bit about fit. Because
Oh,
this is where
yes.
I think there is God, it's just such a ginormous unlock, right? Especially as the data around so many different body types will be
Yeah.
available. It's taken a while to get, and it's, still there on how do you get really the accuracy of how a product or how a material sits and flows on the body.
Yeah.
But, we're still all byproducts of the fit model being a size 8 and then everything
Mm,
being scaled up or scaled down as a result of that.
yeah.
Uh, Obviously, we know that impacts fit. I often, or also think about it, extending it to the idea of being as the customer experience. I'm online. I want to see how something fits my body, because
Yeah.
my body type is, different. And so it's an unlock as well as there. Let's talk a little bit more about how some of the fit technologies out there, not just for apparel, but even footwear, is changing the.
Mhm. I think what's fascinating here is I think we have to talk about the Ozempic effect and how body shapes are changing. A lot of brands, I mean, all the ones that I've ever worked with, I think we updated our fit and our fit model and our grading maybe a few times every 5 years, if that, right? It was, it's shocking. And I think right now, because of the Ozempic effect, we have to really look at the sizing and how we're creating product for the sizes that are buying our product and who is going to buy from us because of this Ozempic effect. Um, I think that when we physically sample everything, it's really difficult to use opportunities and insights from market to adjust our sizing and grading. But there are a lot of solutions out there that are incorporated by digital product creation where we can impact sizing quite quickly and adjust based on insights from market, insights from our customer, and of course, insights from returns, right? What are we learning? What is the customers telling us about a fit of a garment or a fit of a product? Are we listening? How do we capture all of that data quickly? Hello, AI, Gen AI tools, right? And how do we impact the way that we are using our, how we're adjusting our size scales? So I think that there's a lot of opportunity again, not only to impact and improve fit and function of a garment, of apparel, of accessories, even where we're having, where we have our shoulder straps for our handbags. All of
Right.
that is being impacted by the Ozempic effect and how body shapes are changing. So it's more important than ever for brands to really think about um, improving fit and function more, I would say more frequently than is industry norm.
Well, let's talk through because another orientation or framework that's used in product to market is the distinction between pre-season and in-season.
Ah,
And granted
yes.
that's gotten we tried to have very separate processes, tons of work about trying to have them blended because they shouldn't be thought of separately. Certainly are, and a lot of people might not know out there that it's merchants who actually start the process
Yeah.
with design where they're giving and all of a sudden the name escaped me, a shell of a plan of, these are the number of
Line
shirts.
plan architecture.
Yes, thank
Probably.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that thanks perimenopause. Now I can't remember things I spent, 25 years thinking about in my life.
I
Uh,
know.
but when we think about the unlock that happens at, well, one, let's think about the challenge. 52 weeks out, they're trying to
Mm,
figure out what they should be recommending to design in terms of the type of assortment matrix they need to have. And it's as a result of that, they don't even have selling on that current season to understand it.
yeah.
So that's, to be honest, they might have looked at like 2 weeks worth of selling, right? That was part of the push to try to get, pipeline calendars, under 52 weeks so they could have more insights to selling. However, that's still a very traditional way of thinking
Yeah.
about it. And this is where that unlock of consumer data is not being used real time to be able to iterate through that. So let's talk a little bit about the merchandising piece of it. And then we have the teams like planning and inventory management,
Yeah.
pricing, who are working, the 5 Ps still are true today, right product, right time. Is it right? 5 Ps? Is that what we said? Right?
Well, I just say right product, right time, right place, and right price because
Yes.
all of those things will impact if you're going to win at retail or if you're going to lose at retail, right? It all comes down to profitability, and profitability means you need to have insight into what your consumer wants, what they don't know they want yet. So driving trend, right? Not only meeting trend. And a lot of that comes from having time to analyze your customer, getting insights, closing that customer feedback loop. And you cannot do that with when your calendar overlaps season over season. Many merchants I talked to today, they're working on 3 seasons at one time. And we can avoid that if we had a shorter calendar. So it's not only about getting faster to market, it's all about getting to market with the right product at the right time, in the right place, at the right price. And how you do that is with tools that can help you get there faster and smarter.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things people might not understand if you're not knee deep in this side, and it's again, we've got a lot of head scratchers in this industry. I've
Yes.
always joked, but I think it's true. Retailers aren't great causal thinkers. Meaning, right, we're very emotional, but we're not really good at saying, oh, A plus B equals C. And, trying to unlock this. And one of those is we still focus on everything from a product perspective, and that inclusion of the customer insights, which has usually been held by marketing, and you think about, you said kind of held
Yeah.
captive, is something that's not gotten unlocked. When Lisa and I first met, it was when I was with a company called TalkDesk that focused in on contact center technology. And my aha, which we had kind of at the same time, was
Yeah.
goodness gracious, there is so much information that can be leveraged about the
Yeah.
customer and how they're responding to product that otherwise could take weeks upon weeks for a merchant or production to understand a trend.
Yeah.
That ties us nicely into where are we seeing the value unlocked in the in-season process, and a little bit of what in-season means versus pre-season for those of us
Yeah.
who don't live and breathe
So, so in season is the season that you're in. Exactly what it says.
it.
So, today we are in spring. I would say pre-spring, spring. And instead of working on spring 27, right, or spring 26, 27, we're actually seeing current spring season drop on the floor. And as a merchant, what I would do, and I'm sure you did as well, is we would go to the shop floor. We would try everything on, making sure that the customer likes it, help them style, talk to the sales associates, all those things that you would physically need to do to understand what's happening in season. Now, today there is this amazing opportunity with technology to tell us in real time how your customer is reacting to that product. If they're returning a product, why? If they're buying it online or abandoning it in their cart online, you could actually use those insights to impact what's happening in your store. So I think that there's this opportunity that we're not really taking a hold of, and learning about not only the customer, but how that customer is interacting with the product. So in season, we have things like replenishment. We have reorders in season. We have store transfers, which I will take you back quite a few years when I was an early merchant, and I literally used to carry the bag to the other store to do the store transfer. And I mean, you don't have to do that anymore, right? We don't have to ship all of our goods at the same time. So working with your DC partners, with your 3PL partners to not only help in capacity planning and allocation, but optimizing the best time to take that product to that store that needs it in season, right? There's also there's some amazing tools out there that will help you do comp shopping. And as a merchant, comp shopping is like it's part of retail fundamentals. So having insight into different parts of either, wherever you're selling, if it's globally or if it's regionally, you can understand how your customer is shopping and use those insights to impact maybe orders that haven't been placed yet, or reorders, or changing a color or a pattern. And you can do this if you have digital capabilities across product creation, merchandising, and of course, allocation and planning.
Yeah, so one of the things as I became smarter on generative AI is that, you could easily now go screen scrape from your competitors and put that into Gen AI and say, give me a summary of what you're seeing. Help
Yeah,
compare that to what I'm doing today. And I think, we've discussed, demand forecasting, machine learning, predictive analytics, which is now is kind of how it's being told under the
yeah,
AI umbrella, is an area that I think has got we're further along, knowing that it's more widely integrated with, distribution, logistics, replenishment models, etc. But the unlock of generative AI is something that we haven't really seen to the degree
yeah,
like to. And when we think about now the complexity in planning and forecasting as it relates to demand and fulfillment, it used to be easy, right? You knew where the demand was coming from a store or from online. But now with all of the different fulfillment methods, it's become even more important
yeah,
to be able to how you figure out how you unlock the data that you have, but then the analytics, as well as how you're using maybe Gen AI to help you to ask about what's the story that's behind the numbers that's happening here. So again, massive unlocks. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned it, but post-sale.
oh
So we
yeah.
talked about pre-sale, we're selling it. Now we're at the, post-sale part of it. And we know that there's a ton of things now happening as relates to circularity. We
Mhm.
talked a little bit around returns already, and how that can inform, but let's dive in a little bit deeper to where you see the opportunities post-sale.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. So I sit on the board of Goodwill Great Lakes, and I've actually learned a lot about circularity through sitting on the board, because Goodwill does a lot of good work in this space in particular. Um, During NRF, it feels like ages ago, but it was really a week and a half ago. I worked with Scott Case, who's the VP of Sustainability of NRF, and also Deloitte's sustainability team. And we had an invite-only retailer meeting on circularity and what brands are doing today around reverse logistic planning and how they're using AI and RFID to help determine what customers are bringing back through things like take back programs like North Face has one, Patagonia has one, and how they're using these tools to make new product, or if it can be repaired. So there's a lot of tools out there that help brands, retailers determine if that product can be used post sale to extend the life of that product. Now, this not only is an opportunity for brands to have a great sustainability strategy and, inform their sustainability practice, but it's also a revenue model. And I think what's interesting here is that once you start thinking about reverse logistics and the planning around that, using technology will only help you strategize so that you can make a profit with some of these models.
Absolutely. What did you have any aha moments, or things that were shared as in terms of opportunities and challenges coming out of that workshop?
I
Which,
think
by
the
the way,
biggest,
congratulations.
thank you,
That's
thank you.
such a monumental moment
It
and
was
value that you're
amazing.
bringing to our industry.
It was amazing. We're actually working on the recap of that meeting. It was closed door, so we can't name a lot of the people in the room, but there were heads of sustainability from brands like big global brands, and they're doing some amazing things across furniture, apparel, accessories, and footwear. So we really covered all categories. The biggest aha moment for me was that, I talk a lot about process innovation. We work with market leading brands on process innovation and helping them to onboard things like the right technology or ask the right questions from the technology. And what was interesting is that even though a lot of brands may not think circularity is something that they could even take part in, they absolutely can from a materials perspective. Now, when we talk about materials, it's textiles, trims, print, pattern, color, anything that is a component of the product is your material, right? And if you think about this great example is the JLo bag from Tapestries, Coach's Soho bag. That is, there was one that's made out of denim and it's 100% circular. And what's interesting there is they worked with a vendor out of Canada, actually, called Beyond and Vogue. And what they do is they're a reseller, so thrift. They were collecting denim so that Coach could use the denim to make this bag. So 100% circular. Crate and Barrel has another example of 100% circular product. So for me, when I talk about materials for strategy and product creation, and this is some of the work we do with brands, they can actually use a lot of their waste to create new product. And I think that can not only inform their sustainability metrics and of course strategies, but it's great for the planet. And it's just, I think that was my biggest aha moment is like, we need to kind of lean in more to process innovation around product creation.
So we do have two questions that I
Oh,
just noticed we have. Excuse me. So before we dive into our next set of questions, it actually translate well because we're going to talk about more specific examples and brands that are innovating, both from a tech and process perspective. But the first one is Material Exchange, a digital fashion material sourcing platform, which I'll be honest, didn't even know those existed. Naturally, they should, has recently introduced Frank AI. Have you had a chance to test drive it, or do you have any thoughts around what's going on? I'm going to extend to that question, thoughts that are going on around technologies that are addressing this.
I have heard of it and I'm curious. I haven't had time to kind of dig in, but it's definitely on my list. I think that any technology that's going to help a brand reduce the amount of overdevelopment, I'm all in for that. And I think that there's a lot we can do from a process perspective, but there's a lot we can do from a technology perspective. And I'll give you a couple of examples of brands that are using AI today. H&M and Zara, right? They use AI in tracking purchase patterns, which informs their merch and forecasting strategies, right? We know that they're using that. Amazon also, with their algorithms, they're always improving. In fact, it's not humans that are doing the buys for Amazon, they're algorithms, right? You have to have there's like layers of approvals if you're a merchant and you want to make a change to a buy. So it's
Well,
like
I
the
was going
flip
to say,
side.
sorry to interrupt, but one of
Yeah.
the, head scratchers for me as well is, again, I'm dating myself. This is quite long ago, but from a demand forecasting model, that there's a lot of noise at the lower levels. I could understand maybe at a SKU or style, color level, there was hesitancy to really understand. But once you moved up the merch hierarchy, right, you got to class and department and
Yeah.
division, because there was so much more data, these algorithms were pretty, excuse my French, damn good. And I was like,
Yeah.
do you know how easy open to buy could become? Right. 4 day
Yeah.
processes that take people out of preseason, all of this manual work. And it's like, why don't you leverage, we had, sales forecast or inventory forecast in the tools, but they were often hidden measures, right? Nobody even
Yeah.
ended up looking at it. So, yeah, some of these have been around for a long time. They're no brainers.
Yeah.
I think we still see, right? I mean, Amazon's doing something right. when it comes to
They
inventory
are.
management.
Yeah. And we're seeing, even Walmart and Target also leaning into
Yes.
more AI driven merch planning and forecasting tools. But we talked about in season earlier, and I think the other thing to think about is the open to buy, right? When we have in season open to buy, which means we have money in season to
We
buy a
hope.
product in season, right? What that does is it helps us to connect with the customer with the product that they really need and that they really want. So again, if you are using technology, digital tools, or AI in your merch planning and forecasting tools, you can actually unlock more open to buy in season. So again, a win-win, right? No brainer, right? As you said. But I think
Well,
that
and this
there's
is one of the areas too, Lisa, that people might not understand is a
okay.
huge additional cost that impacts
Oh
EBITDA.
yeah.
Doesn't always go to the product margin, is having to air product.
Oh yeah.
Because they're, they're not seeing the trends fast enough, or they see the trend and then they're having to chase into it, or there were production
Yeah.
delays, or, there's a variety of reasons. But air is a huge impact to this. And when we think about it, you said it, it's all about the profit. And certainly we can all suspect that air is not cheap.
It is not cheap. In fact, I used to approve Air decisions for Waffle. So I did see that, but it was so interesting because the product teams and the merch teams didn't get that information until it was too late, right?
Yep,
So we're the way that we plan product and seasonal flow, all of that, I think technology can help us do that way better. But
absolutely.
imagine if we had AI driven tools, and we trusted the technology. I mean, it would be a game changer for brands. It's very clear that especially I think in 2025, the winners and losers of retail are, I mean, there's going to be a more distinctive line between them.
Absolutely. All right, let's go on. We have a handful of other examples, and then I'm gonna close this section with a pretty cute question, or cute,
Oh
maybe
yeah,
funny to me. But let's talk
sure.
about Adidas, and Tommy and what they're doing, as well as
Yeah.
Savage X.
Yep. Actually, it's Adidas, Tommy, so PVH Group, Nike, Savage. They're all using AI and VR in not only in virtual try-on, but also in design and digital product creation. Carhartt also, I think, is a great example. What that allows is even sales teams, marketing teams, even customers could actually get insight into what the product looks like without you physically creating that product. So if you have the right tools that are AI driven to have more, I would say, accurate color matching, to detect errors in textiles or in an all over print, you're not only going to save time to market, but you're going to save time for physically designing and developing that material, but also that product, the proto, the sample. And imagine how much time and resources and, of course, money that you would save in working this way. Zania allows customers to um, personalize their products using colors and fabrics, but all of that is digital. Like they don't have to go and touch and feel, which is, I mean, not only a time saver, but we're not creating that product because it hasn't been sold yet. So
Exactly.
it's almost like this made to measure type of mentality, right? Where you don't have that physical product and you wait until you have the sale to have that physical product made. Um, Carhartt, I love to talk about. And I've talked to them about this. Their tech designers are fantastic. They work with their factory partners, and it's not like their factory partner is a service provider. They literally partner with them on things like fit and function and using AI in digital sample development and tech pack creation. Also managing workload by complexity of the product, which is what I talked about a bit earlier. They're able to use AI to manage their workforce, like how much time are they spending on a certain garment that can be designed fully digitally, whereas the most complicated product, you'll need, this many protos and this many fit and testing capabilities. So there's a lot of I mean, we talked about Amazon already, but I think Amazon also does a really good job with that. The vision industry, beauty, Warby Parker, virtual try-on during COVID. I bought 3 pairs of glasses, right? I've also used virtual try-on from a few brands, beauty brands. Sephora is great. I mean, they've onboarded the L'Oreal platform, I think, to do this for them. So Shiseido does it, right? So I think that there's a lot of interesting things happening today around AI that is being fueled by things like AR and VR, which not only helps design and development, but also tools that are customer facing.
There's an interesting question here that I will say I didn't know. I love that I already learned something new today, and it's early in my day here on the West Coast. So from Kimberly, have you seen a change in interest from North America brands to embrace a localized on-demand post-purchase production architecture,
Mhm.
much like the work Walmart is doing, 2-day shipping, doubling down on their brick and mortar locations, et cetera, to challenge Amazon? And I will say, I knew people were thinking about it, but in terms of this notion of like the production architecture and leading that fulfillment piece into the planning process, is something that I think the majority of brands are way behind on.
I agree with you. I think that from an emerging brand standpoint, I think they're more likely to test models like that, especially around made to measure or flexible product development, especially localized. Not seeing that as much across the board. I would say 80% of brands are still manufacturing in Asia. Um, and I think that's where I think there's a lot more work to be done because there are local and domestic opportunities, capabilities to get closer to market with things like real-time product development. So I think I would like to see more of it. I
Yeah,
think that sadly, it's cheaper to create product 52 weeks ahead of market because, I mean, the cost of raw materials and resources and capacity planning, it all adds up, right? I think what's interesting here, and I love to bring this up, is that, okay, what's actually happening in your business? How much excess inventory do you have? How many markdowns do you have? Because the way that we create product and the amount of product that we create is not going to generate demand, right? More supply does not equal more demand,
not at all.
ever.
Yeah, I mean, the stack it high, let it fly model that, Gap was somewhat famous for,
Yeah,
certainly was great when you had great product, but has not been in vogue for over 25 years with
yeah,
business that way. Yeah.
it's true. It's
All
true.
right.
I don't know if I answered that question or if it was a comment, but I mean, I think that there's a lot of more work to be done in like in season and in demand production.
So before we go to where I'm particularly passionate about, which is the people side of this, which of course we've not forgotten through our discussions to date, but we'll tap in a little bit more to this. Here's a fun question from Zeki. Hey, have you seen the Woodpecker Coats version of the AI-inspired Elon Musk coat? Will Poho, the founder CEO of Woodpecker, just launched the Elon Puffer coat. I
I
haven't
have
seen
not
it
seen
either.
this. Please send it to me. I saw the
There's a
question.
link in the thing. So everybody, if you're on, go look at that. I'm curious around what kind of
I
bestseller
know.
that will be. Um, all right, so let's pivot and talk about the future of what work looks like, how the game is being changed as a result of AI, which we've given a lot of examples. But we know that there are things that are standing in the way. And you know that
Yeah.
I'm passionate about the people side. It's what my organization is focused on. And I thought that there was no better way to tee up this part of the discussion, which is from an article that you wrote for Interline earlier this year. So it starts with, imagine our surprise sitting on Zoom with product leaders of a leading brand, asking them what is the most pressing issue they face right now as they look to change the way they create product and go to market. Perhaps they'll say supply chain issues or inflation. Maybe they have too many SKUs or can't keep pace with changes in customer behavior. It was none of the above. The answer was the mental health of our teams.
Hmm.
We didn't anticipate that answer, and it led to our own epiphany. Brands changing the way they create product is not propelled with just a business case. It's propelled by people and what they personally stand to gain from that change. In other words, there is a personal case for change to be made, not just a business
Yeah.
one. Yet current mindsets and behaviors of people are significant barriers to this degree of digital change. And companies acknowledge that scaling DPC is limited more by existing processes, cultures, and beliefs than by the limitations of the technology. Moreover, as new technologies are introduced, research has shown that people have a natural tendency to resist change. One of the models that I use for change management, because it's super simple, but I think is something that organizations do have to really start to wrestle with, which is the people side and how the work
Yeah.
does change, is potential minus interference equals performance. So
Hmm.
talk about some of those things that we've talked about through that you mentioned here are barriers, but where do you think things need to be changed and where the opportunity lies?
I think it starts with the leaders in an organization. If your C-suite is not really believing that technology can change the way they are working or going to market, then your teams will never onboard the technology. Um, I do think that op models will continue to change, especially as we see the speed of how fast technology is moving. Look at the Nvidia stocks today, right? And it's a little bit scary, right? It's scary if your organization is still standing on by the wayside, watching other brands like Walmart, like Amazon, um, even Sephora for that matter, they really onboard technology and, of course, leverage diverse teams. Their op models have changed. I think we have to start thinking about how can technology, how can digital tools, how can AI-driven tools change the way we create product, get smarter, and spend more time with our customers, right? Because it is making the personal case, right? If the mental health of your teams, which is merchants working on 3 seasons at a time, designers doing the same, sourcing, just like, racking their brain trying to
Yeah,
optimize
hair
their
on
mail
fire.
matrix. Yeah, if we're not giving the teams time and space to make the right decisions for the customer, how it's tied to the right product assortment, we're going to continually see these teams spiral. And that's why it's important to innovate process, which also impacts how are we looking at our op model.
100%. You had me at hello. I do want to, I do want to go back to a question that it takes us back a couple of seconds, but I think is important. So from Jennifer, she says, your mention of digital personalization and product being akin to a historic retail concept of made to measure resonates for me. I've been attuned to looking at tech innovations that digitize many of the hallmark concepts of upmarket or luxury retail. The core thread is an approach that gets closer to starting with the customer. What else are you seeing involved in this area, especially with customers being external, internal, for example, with associate teams?
Well, I mean, there's a few things in there.
Yeah, there's a
But
lot.
yeah, there's a lot. But I think what we're seeing is that we are reducing the size of the assortment, right? I know that if you were a merchant or a designer, that you're always, doing SKU rationalization exercises, which is basically cutting your bottom SKUs, tightening up your assortment. But I think now more important than ever is to really understand the ROI of each SKU, each item. How are we thinking about our assortment? Are we thinking about it from a seasonless plus fashion point of view? I call it SPF. Me and all these terms, we love it. But I think it is important to think about, okay, we cannot throw supply at the customer and think that it's all going to sell, right? That's not going to happen, and it never has. So incorporating things like made to measure, or taking it back a little bit, raw material planning and how we think about our raw materials. Are they sustainable? Are they the right textiles that we're using? Do we need to keep diversifying our mills in order to build a huge textile library? No, we probably don't. So I think it's about thinking in those kinds of ways where we need to simplify, we need to reduce, and we need to reuse as well. May as well do that other R, right? Reuse materials that we know work well. Like we don't need to recreate the wheel because the customer cannot tell. So things like made to measure are really important, where you give that option to the customer and they choose what they want and you make things in real time. That is, I mean, the most ideal scenario. But that's not everybody's model, right? It's not profitable for everybody. Again, not sure if I answered that question because there were a lot of things in there, but I think it really
I
does come down to creating that right product at the right time and thinking about your assortment where you have that longevity around seasonless product that you don't need to recreate. Because as soon as you add a new color to an item number, it's a new style. And that is taking up space.
Absolutely. So we're nearing our end. I had no doubt that we would fill it up. You and I could talk for hours about this. I can imagine there'll be a part two maybe someday. That would be awesome. And some of our other questions that we were going to chat about, we've already gotten to, which you talked about the no-brainer place for companies to start, digitizing materials, the tracking development of physical products. I mean, process innovation, thinking about the people side of things, and understanding that the work is transforming. And I think the use case world we're living in is preventing us for understanding that, adoption is slow. People aren't getting the ROI they're looking for. And it's because they really aren't thinking with that holistic view around how change is happening. And as we mentioned, it is a really there is a huge opportunity for us as women, because we're largely more represented in these functions, to have an impact. So as we close out, in honor of the reason why we do these sessions, is how do you think women can be leaders within their org? There's a connotation that AI has to be, you have to have technical background. And there's a
Yeah.
question that talks a little bit about that, that I'd love to take offline, which is like, how do I get more AI in my resume? But if I'm a merchant or if I'm in design or whatever, what are the ways that they can be the entrepreneurs for their org?
I think continue to be a sponge. Educate yourself. Do it for you so that you remain relevant. What's
Yeah.
fascinating to me is that, of course, I grew up in that merch world. I'm a retail insider. So what I do is I take my friends who are merchants and I teach them. And I say, come to Coterie. They go into Coterie anyway, but go to the education sessions. Come to NRF. Come to some of our events, right, with Retail AI Council and Retail Women in Tech. I think it's important to really educate yourself and take ownership of that education because I don't think that anyone's going to do it for you. I think that as women, we already, take on a lot because we can. And I think this isn't just another thing that we should be doing. This should be a daily thing. I really think that.
I 100% agree. And so I think for us as women is to not be concerned that it is a tech focused skill, and competency, that where the real opportunity is because we just talked about all of the people challenges. How,
Yeah.
based on the knowledge you have, how are you telling the story, showing what the future can be? And at the end of the day, I mean, I know that there's a lot of anxiety that exists out there. Our roles will change and some might be eliminated, but this has been true since the beginning of time. Where I think that the energy should be focused on is how it's unlocking us to do the jobs that we want to do. Nobody wants to be doing a PDP upload in Excel spreadsheet. Or sourcing does not want to have, 20 different tabs with all these different matrices around what's going on in their supplier base. We have the opportunity to actually get to do the best work of our
Yeah.
lives and love it with the adoption of AI. So go be one of those leaders within your organization, showing everybody the way.
And trust the tech,
Trust
right?
it. Yes, it's
Yeah,
a
trust the
trust
tech.
it. But as you say, and let's close out with, I love your phrase, which is tech and touch.
Yeah, and it is that balance. It's
Yep.
always a balance of tech and touch. Technology is not going to take our jobs. It's going to augment and assist the way that we go to market.
As it has been from the beginning of time.
Yep.
So, Lisa, I can't wait to see you again soon. I only got to get a couple of hugs at NRF,
Yeah.
but I love having this discussion with you, and I hope we get to have more of it, especially as we know this technology is changing so rapidly. And as we move throughout the year, we're going to see more places that it's adding value. So, thank you very much, my love,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for everybody who joined us. Please feel free to find us on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to
Yes.
talk further with you.
And sign up for the Merchant Life if you haven't already.
Oh, yes, I read it every time.
Thank
All righty. Thank you.
you.